who were thirsty on that day and they were calling out for water, or those young children who were calling out for their uncles or their brothers or their fathers, or the mothers who were calling out for their sons. So there was always a call that was made on that day, which was a heartbreaking and emotional call. These calls transcended time to reach us today, and that's why we're saying that the thirst still remains. The thirst for safety, the thirst for water, the thirst for protection, the thirst for a community, the thirst for family still remains. And that's where you can come in, brothers and sisters, in order to help contribute to society, in order to bring back in order to hopefully help those who are less fortunate than us, so that they can, inshallah, have a family or have loved ones, have water, have food, have everything that they can in order to live a successful life. Today's topic is mothers and the sacrifice of mothers, as we are remembering Baneen alayhi salam. And I start with the words of Nuri Sardar, and he says, "All of my sons for Ali's sons. All of my sons for Ali's sons. I tell my Lord whenever to him I pray, I am the mother who gave her sons away. I am the mother who gave her sons away. I'm a mother who has a pride, and what a pride. I'm the lioness who gave away all her pride. In the love of Muhammad daily I'd abide. I gave everything, and in my Lord I relied. I had a voice that like Ali's battle cry cried. With my 4 children's lives Yazid's rule I defied. I shook his throne with every son. It is the pride that lives with me every day. I am the mother who gave her sons away. How many doors God opens when one door opens. I married Ali and raised for him 4 lions. Each one holds each other's back and holds their burdens. And in the love of Hussein, their bond it strengthens. They are all but presents to the Prince of Heavens, and I'd give them if they were 4 or were thousands. Since they would crawl, I gave them all. I did not allow a single one to stay, because I am the mother who gave her sons away. I gave birth to each son, and beside each cradle, I'd sing them lullabies, and each son I'd cradle. In each lullaby, a lesson to them I tell. You are all mortal, but Hussein is immortal. You are all mortal, but Hussein is immortal. Do not ever let him from his sorrow tremble. When he draws his sword, in front of him assemble. When he draws his sword, in front of him assemble. His sorrows mend, his life defend. I tell my children when in my arms they'd play, I am the mother who gave her sons away. My grandfathers, for wrestling with lions they were praised, and for my beloved Hussein 4 mountains I raised. They gazed into his eyes before in mine they gazed. They saw the beauty in his eyes and were amazed. Every day upon Karbala's dust they all prayed, knowing that just to die for Hussein they were raised. I would not cry, knowing they'd die. I raised them knowing that they would die someday. I am the mother who gave her sons away. And I tell my Lord, you've given me such an honor. I sacrificed so Hussein can live forever. And I make a promise to you, O Creator, if any serve Hussein, their names I'll remember. If any serve Hussein, their names I'll remember. If they ask me for a wish, then I shall answer. To every lover of Hussein, I'm a mother. To every lover of Hussein, I'm a mother. If they love him, they're my children. If they love him, they're my children. I will rescue them if in their grief they sway. I am the mother who gave her sons away. Many thanks to the poet Nuri Sardar for that poem. And you can see and kind of assess from that poem that the topic of motherhood was very much prevalent. And I'm delighted to be able to be joined by our first guest for today's show, a man who is very much experienced in the world of Islamic history and ethics and jurisprudence, and we're delighted to and honored to be joined by Muhammad Ali Muraj, who is joining us over Zoom at the moment. So I'm sure that you can hear me and possibly see me as well. Muhammad Ali, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. How are you today?
I'm doing absolutely well, alhamdulillah. How has your Muharram been so far?
Alhamdulillah, Muharram's been good. Very busy, but alhamdulillah, very, very rewarding as well.
Yeah.
And
So there's
inshallah, we pray
majalis.
that Allah.
I was going to say, where are you kind of based at the moment?
So this year, Alhamdulillah, I'm blessed to be serving three communities simultaneously.
MashaAllah.
In the Midlands, I had my first majlis in Derby, and then I traveled to Burton to have my second majlis, and I have a
Mm.
pre-recorded series of majalis for the community in Switzerland.
MashaAllah. So you are definitely busy, and we very, very much appreciate your valuable time. But I'd love to kind of get into the topic
Pleasure
straight away.
completely.
I think, you know, the topic for today and what we're discussing, because we are remembering al-Baneen alayhi salam and her position with in respect to the tragedy of Karbala and what she offered. But in terms of mothers in general, the sacrifices that they have to go through, be them mothers of orphans, i.e., they are widows, or mothers in general who live in poverty. What sacrifices do mothers often make for their children, especially when it comes to their well-being and their happiness?
So, from the entire life of a child, and if we take from its birth all the way till the child learns how to crawl, walk, and run,
Mm,
throughout that role, the mothers no doubt play a very significant role in the child. But the beauty of the role that they play, rather than other than sacrificing everything that they have, including their youthful years, including their time, including everything, the beauty of their sacrifice is that they ask nothing for in return. And I think
mm,
that really sums up the sacrifice of the mother. Because any other relationship that we may have, whether it's at school, teachers, everyone's doing something for a return. But the
mm,
beauty of the sacrifice of a mother is that they do it without return. And that reminds us of a very beautiful story, that of a youth and the Holy Prophet of Islam.
yeah,
That once a youth comes into the service of the Holy Prophet saying, Ya Rasulullah, my mother is a disabled woman and I take care of her, I carry her on my back, I feed her, I bathe her, I do everything that one is required to do. Have I completed my servitude towards the sacrifice of my mother?
yeah,
And the response of the Prophet is extremely beautiful. And he says, that's not even close. Because the difference between us serving our mothers and the sacrifice that the mothers make is that when we serve our mothers, in our minds, we have that we may lose our mothers quite soon. Whereas our mothers have always our growth in mind. And that's the
yeah.
beauty of the sacrifice of the mother, that they always thinking about the growth that they see in us.
Fantastic. And I guess, the role of a mother would differ to that of a father, in just in terms of the sacrifices. And can you relate anything to those who are less fortunate? So, for example, have you been to? I assume you've been to Iraq, Arba'in or
Alhamdulillah,
Muharram, or
yes.
yeah. But
Yes, the last time I went Iraq was in during the Arba'in. So Alhamdulillah,
okay,
I was blessed to visit the
fantastic.
holy city.
Fantastic. So you must have seen those who are less fortunate, those who are living in poverty, those on the ground, the orphans, widows, for example, and most of them are mothers. So in terms of their sacrifices and what they go through, can you kind of shed light maybe on what their mindset is from a mother perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. You see, like I said, for a mother, they wish nothing but the growth of their child, even if it is
Yeah,
at their own detriment. And Imam Zainul Abidin, as he eloquently puts it in his Risalatul Huquq, that nobody comes even close to do what a mother does for his child, because the mother will starve herself but make sure the child is fed. The
yeah,
mother will stay thirsty but make sure that the child is quenched. And the beauty of how a mother plays a significant role in that of a child is that the child sees everything through the eyes of their mother, right? The mother is a window of the child to the
yeah,
world, especially in the first formative years of the child. And as you mentioned, Arba'in, and as you mentioned, the ziyara in Iraq, it reminds me of a very beautiful story that I share with my own mother. And
mm,
no matter how old you get, the way that you see the world is always through the eyes of your mother. And one thing that my mother, I remember her, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give her a long life, and everyone, and all the
inshallah.
mothers around the world, is from a young age, every time we would walk towards Arba'in, every time we'd walk towards Karbala, she'd always have a few coins in with her. And she'd always give me those coins saying, why don't you give this to the following poor person, or why don't you put it in the box? And the beauty of that is from a very young age, you're instilled to see the world in the eyes of your mother. And charity, for example, given this is a show all about charity, it's something that it's instilled within the children from a very young age.
Absolutely.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. Can you possibly shed light on the different roles or the sacrifices made by a mother compared to a father?
Yeah, so I can use the analogy or the tradition from the Holy Prophet. Not that a father plays a lesser role, but
No.
through the words of the Holy Prophet himself, that once a man by the name of Hakim bin Hizam, he came to the Holy Prophet asking, "Oh Rasulullah, who is it that I should serve?" And so the Holy Prophet responds thrice: "Your mother, your mother, your mother, and then your father."
Mm.
And so, although in the more traditional roles, it is the father that ends up going outside working, and in the more traditional role, it is the mother that, especially in the formative years, becomes a model for the child.
Yeah.
And I think that role is really important, especially when it comes, when we look into the examples of our scholars, for example. Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari, one of the heads of the seminaries in Najaf,
Yeah.
one of the most eminent jurists of his time, when his own mother passed away, he was bitterly crying. And when he was asked by a student that, "Sheikh, you're such a huge personality. Why are you crying like a child at the loss of your mother?" And the response of Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari is noteworthy. And he says that whatever you see, whatever Sheikh Murtaza al-Ansari that you see right now is because of the formative training that my mother gave me. And of course, right now, the mothers and the fathers, they also are able to go out, but at the same time, the forefront goal in their mind is all about the growth of the child and being a best model towards their children.
Absolutely fine. So we're just going to pause there if it's okay, Muhammad Ali, and we'll come back to you in a few moments. Thank you so much for your time so far. Just a quick reminder to the dear viewers that whoever wants to contribute to Imam Hussein Charity based on the words and the inspirational words of Muhammad Ali Muraj in terms of mothers and the plight of mothers and what they go through, essentially it's very, very simple. The details are on your screen, but there's a QR code that will take you to a website, and that website will give you a couple of options, different projects that we are fundraising for. And one of them is the majalis. So the majalis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, funding those majalis so that they can serve more zuwar, and those zuwar can be able to come to the majalis, learn about Imam al-Hussein, learn about Imam al-Hussein's message, and of course grow the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through these majalis in Karbala. Other than that, you know, the heat is unbearable at times in Iraq, and so water is very, very important. And so £10 would go towards approximately 400 cups of clean cold water for the zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And the water well campaign is £1,400, goes towards a water well to be built in local villages and towns where they need it most. And those are the three kind of main campaigns. But of course, you can go onto our website to find out more details as to how to donate and the campaigns that we're donating for. That is, inshallah, for you to be able to consider. Just going back to you, Muhammad Ali, if it's okay. I mean, I'd love to just take a bit of a side step from what we've prepared, and look at the importance of majalis, because you've mentioned, you know, mothers from a young age, they teach them whatever they teach them from a young age, things like charity, and also majalis. And I want to kind of shed light on the role of a mother and the importance of going to majalis and encouraging children to go to majalis early in their years so that they become accustomed to that type of mourning. What role does a mother play in that?
I think at that point, it is first important to give a shout out to all of the young mothers with very young kids. I know my wife is a young mother herself, and my mother was also a mother of a young child. And I think one of the most difficult things that a mother has to kind of face is take care of a child that is screaming, crying, all the while trying to pay attention to the azar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam that's happening. But despite all of that, despite all of the troubles that may be quite gigantic, to be kind of sitting in a hole, sitting in a toddler's room, not being able to concentrate in your own majalis, but ensuring that you're able to take your child from his infancy or from their infancy all the way till they're older. And I think this is something that is extremely tremendous, and one that should be appreciated, one that should be encouraged. And whenever we do see young mothers or young fathers that do take the troubles of taking their child from a very young age, we should encourage that happening, because that's how the mothers instill that training of the love of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, the love of Aza and the love of Azadari from those formative years, which are crucial for any child's development.
Fantastic, fantastic. So in terms of like the way that society and something that I've been thinking about as well, you touched upon this as well, and thank you for that shout out for those young mothers who are still encouraged to take their kids to the majalis. What ways in what ways does society recognize and appreciate the sacrifices of mothers, especially when it comes to raising their children within the light of majalis?
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is that whatever a society does, they can never fully appreciate the role of a mother, especially when it comes in instilling the love of the Ahlul Bayt. Because the troubles that a mother takes in the formative years of the child gives yields and has a huge return of investment per se in the later years. All of the leaders that you see are because of the mothers that sacrificed so much, which is why it brings to mind the tradition of the Holy Prophet that should an individual even serve their mother with the amounts of sands in the desert or the drops of rain in the days of the rest of his life, he wouldn't even have paid her the due of a single day that she carried him in the womb. And so a beautiful story, and like I said, the society can never fully appreciate the role of the mother. But given that we're in the Azaf, Imam Hussein alayhi salam, one beautiful story that comes into mind on how Imam Hussein alayhi salam appreciates the role of the mother is a story that takes place a couple of years ago with regards to a mujtahid who lived, studied in Najaf for around 30 years. And when you have the opportunity to live and study in Najaf for that length of time, of course, you're so close to Karbala, you visit Karbala as often that you can. And so the mujtahid recalls saying that once I went to Karbala, and when in my many travels to Karbala, and I noticed that an individual comes forth and without reciting Ibn Dukhul, without having any of the etiquettes of the ziyarah, he comes in, looks at the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, very roughly places his hand and says, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. And as soon as he says that, the mujtahid says that I receive a response, and I hear a response, Wa alayka salam ya Abdullah. And so the mujtahid starts thinking to himself that I've come to this ziyarah for 30 years and never have I heard a voice coming from the very of Aba Abdullah, Wa alayka salam. And so the individual, as soon as he does that, he goes back out. So the mujtahid goes behind him and says, what's the secret that when you come so roughly and that Imam Hussein alayhi salam responds to you? And the person says that I've done nothing special. However, one thing that I remember was a few years ago when my mother was very old, she would come and she would ask me, son, I'd like to visit Imam Hussein alayhi salam. However, I would say that I have no means to take you. I have no money for transport, a bike, a car. So the mother says, look, do whatever you need to, but take me to the very of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So the individual says that I carried my mother from wherever I lived in the village all the way to Imam Hussein alayhi salam. And from that point on, every time I come to the very of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, he responds to me. And so this goes to show that just imagine if Imam Hussein alayhi salam rewards you so much for taking care of your own mother and appreciating the mothers in your own society, then imagine how much he would reward you if you are to praise and remember his own mother, Fatima al-Zahra.
SubhanAllah, that's an amazing point, and really does shed light on the importance of mothers and serving mothers. Thank you very, very much for that. Again, we're going to pause for just a couple of minutes, Muhammad Ali, if it's okay with you, because right now, ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers at home, we are going to go to our team in Iraq who, once again, are tirelessly reporting on the situation in Karbala, specifically when it comes to the Mawaqib, the Majalis, the water campaign, and everything that is going on the third, I believe, third or in the beginning of Muharram, coming closer to the day of Ashura. So we're going to go to our reports or reporters from Iraq, our team, for the IHT team in Iraq. So we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
The Majlis has just finished, and now we are preparing to give food, the Barakat of Imam Hussein, to all the pilgrims that are present. Ladies, children, men, All people that have attended, old and young, are all welcome and present in the Majlis of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. That never finishes. And the tears that are always shed for Imam Hussein never dry. And we always say, Labbayka ya Hussein, Labbayka ya Hussein, Labbayka ya Hussein. Your donation to Al-Atash campaign will go directly to buying the pulses, the herbs, the spices, and the rice that's being prepared and cooked in the Majlis. The second night of Muharram, and there are still many more nights to come. Donate now and donate today to make a change and have an impact on the pilgrims that come towards Imam al-Hussein. We are in Hawzat Sayyid al-Shuhada, just opposite Bab al-Qibla and opposite Imam Hussein. In this kitchen, over 3,000 meals are being prepared. The majlis is still taking place, and the servants have come, given up their time, not to attend to the majlis, but prepared to cook and distribute the food for those that are present in the majlis. This is one of the multiple kitchens in which thousands of meals are being prepared for those that are coming to the majalis and the ma'at of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Be part of the change. Be part of the donations that Imam Hussein Charity and Foundation is giving towards the ones that are attending the majalis. And as we say always, Labbayka ya Hussein is always our final shout. Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah, Ya Allah. Ya Allah. تفضل خوي.
جاي صعد حاج رضا. صعد يلا.
This is such a slow pace. Minhal, give me swani. Ya Allah. One of the most loved dishes in cooking is hakaka, which is the bottom of the pot. And I'm sure that whenever you attend a Iraqi Imam Barqa, you'll see that everybody fights for it. And it's the most crunchy and delicious of meals. And this is what is served towards the pilgrims and the ones that attend the majlis, because they deserve it. They deserve the best as they come to serve the best of the best. And it's Imam Hussein alayhi salam. Yeah. Hand in hand, united, working together under the flag of Imam al-Hussein. We all unite under his service. It brings us together. It unites us and brings unity and happy and builds bonds between all the youth and the elders in our community. Today, over 400 kilos of rice is being cooked. And this is just the second night of Muharram. We have 13 or 14 more nights in which cooking and preparation will be. For pulses, more than 300 kilos of beans is being prepared. And this is boiling, stewing them up, making sure that they are properly cooked so that all the pilgrims that come, they have the best meals. More than 10,000 cups of water have been donated today so far, and much more is to come. Not one, not two, not three, not four, but multiple pots in which they are cooking in. And yet, nobody gets tired, because more service gives you more energy and it gives you more power. They've been working for hours and hours, from yesterday night up until today's morning. Over 12 hours it takes to prepare these meals and dishes. And don't forget that you can participate, give, and be alongside us to Al-Atash campaign at Imam Hussein Charity and Foundation. Your donation to Al-Atash campaign will go directly to buying the pulses, the herbs, the spices, and the rice that's being prepared and cooked in the majlis. The second night of Muharram, and there are still many more nights to come. Donate now and donate today to make a change and have an impact on the pilgrims that come towards Imam Hussein.
Many thanks to Abu Talib for that detailed report on the food preparation for the majalis. And once again, he encouraged you, dear viewers, to donate and to contribute because they do need the funds. At the end of the day, there's only a limited funds available for these majalis. And if they don't have those funds, then they can't buy the ingredients. If they can't buy the ingredients, then they can't cook the food. And then obviously then the zuwar will be affected. So please do contribute as much as you can. It's very important that we do so because at the end of the day, we're hoping to connecting to Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and as we mentioned, the thirst remains. So if you are wanting to donate, the process is very, very simple. On your screen now, there should be a QR code or a website that will take you to a page where you're able to donate to the cause of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. £50 goes towards the majlis and the muwaqib. There are many different campaigns as well, but £50 goes towards the majalis, £10, just a small £10 goes towards approximately 400 cups of water for the zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and there is the water well campaign that you can contribute to as well. We are delighted to be joined by Muhammad Ali Muraj, who before the report was discussing the importance of mothers and the sacrifices of mothers, because tonight we are remembering al-Baneen, and I want to now turn our attention to al-Baneen, Muhammad Ali, if it's okay. Just a brief, intro into who Baneen was and her sacrifice when it comes to the tragedy of Imam Hussein alayhi salam.
Yes, absolutely. However, if you'll allow me, I'd like to chime in the first campaign that the Imam Hussein charity is running. And there's a very beautiful analogy that comes to mind. And it's, of course, a wonderful job that yourself and the team are doing. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the wasila of Imam Hussein and his mother, grant everyone the highest of rewards.
Inshallah.
And the beauty of spending in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the beauty in spending in the way of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, and the analogy that comes to mind is, if you have a glass of water, or we'll take a drop of water even, and no matter how expensive the carpet may be, that drop of water would be wasted if it is spilled on that carpet. However, if that water to be mixed and to be dropped into the vast ocean, then for as long as that ocean remains alive, that drop of water that you donated towards the ocean will always remain alive. And similarly, no matter how much money we may spend on ourselves, that money is always spent. However, even if it's a penny that we spend in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and a penny that we spend in the ocean of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein's tabarruk, for as long as the message of Aba Abdullah remains alive, that penny that we shall donate shall also, inshallah, be remained alive till the day of judgment.
That's a very, very good point, Muhammad Ali. Really, really appreciate that one. And inshallah, we are all able to contribute to the ocean of tabarruk for Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So on that point, just in terms of the selflessness of mothers, can you give us an example of Baneen and how she demonstrated vast amounts of selflessness and sacrifice in history?
Absolutely. When it comes to mothers in general, every single mother that is able to put their own kids before herself is no doubt a selfless mother. However, the beauty of the mothers of Karbala, and more specifically the mother Baneen as a mother, is the beauty of hers is that she put the cause of Aba Abdullah before her own kids. And that is what is most beautiful about it. And the way that she did this was throughout the upbringing of her 4 kids, including Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. From the moment that she entered the house to the moment that she raised her kids, throughout of that, one thing that comes time and time again throughout the history was how she would train Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, how she would train her kids to address Aba Abdullah and Imam al-Hussein and Lady Zainab and Lady Kulthum. And the beauty is that she herself, the moment that she stepped into the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen, she would ask Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, please don't call me by my name Fatima, for whenever you call me by that name, it reminds the kids of their own mother, Fatima al-Zahra. And from that modeling of the behavior, this is how Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam would grow up to see how his own mother would behave in front of them. And so all of the 4 kids were given the lesson of loyalty by none other than the one who is the epitome of loyalty, al-Banin. Which is why even after the death of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, when Bishr bin Hadlam goes back into Medina carrying the news of the martyrdom of Aba Abdullah, an old woman, none other than al-Banin, she comes forward and she says, "O caller, tell me about my son Hussein." And so when he asks, "Who is this old lady?" she says, "This is al-Banin." And he starts giving her condolences of Abdullah, Uthman, Abbas, Ja'far. But at every point she says, "No, I haven't asked you about my sons. I've asked you about my son Hussein alayhi salam." And this is the epitome of loyalty. We see transition in Karbala, where even the peace treaty or the letter of peace was given to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, saying, "Why don't you leave the camp of Hussein and join the camp of Umar bin Saad?" His summary beautifies the loyalty that was told to her by his mother. And he says, "How can I leave my brother al-Hussein alayhi salam? And you've brought me a peace treaty for me, but not my brother?" And all of this encapsulates with the loyalty that's been trained by none other than al-Banin.
Absolutely amazing points. And look, I really, really appreciate your time, Muhammad Ali Muraj, on today's show. I think you've been fantastic in your detailed answers, and I hope that the audience has resonated with you in terms of being able to now being inspired to contribute back to Imam Hussein charity, and especially those who are less fortunate. Any last words of encouragement to the dear viewers, Muhammad Ali?
Yes, absolutely. And I leave it with the following, that in every verse of the Holy Quran, when we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promotes the act of charity very directly, saying, "Look, give charity, for it will purify your heart. Give charity in secret or in public, for I will reward you." However, there's this point in Surah Al-Hadid, chapter number 57, verse number 11. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promotes this act of charity in a completely different manner and flips it on its head. What does He say? Allah states, "Man dhal ladhi yuqridu Allah qardan hasanan fayudha'ifahu lahu wa lahu ajrun kareem." And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, who is it that will lend Allah a beautiful loan, which Allah will multiply it multiple times? And there's 2 aspects to it. The first one is, does Allah even need a loan? But that's a different discussion altogether. And for the purpose of, for our dear viewers, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that, "Give me a penny and I will multiply it for you." And we'd happily give a penny to a seasoned businessman, and we'd know that he'd give us a return of 10%, 10-fold, 20-fold. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is guaranteeing the return, that for every penny, every pound that you give in my cause, I will no doubt multiply it for you. And what better way to multiply your investment other than giving it in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the tabarruk and through the cause of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, who gave everything he had for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
SubhanAllah, SubhanAllah. Once again, Muhammad Ali Muraj, thank you so much for your time. May Allah bless you and give you the strength to carry on with your majalis this year. And please don't forget us in your du'as.
Ameen. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you for the amazing work that you do. Ahsan.
Thank you, Muhammad Ali, for your time. So now, brothers and sisters, dear viewers at home, we're going to go to a very small break. After that, inshallah, we'll be joined by our second guest of today, as well as discussing more about al-Banin and the sacrifice that she gave and her mindset when it comes to looking after those who are less fortunate than us. So don't go anywhere. Inshallah, we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
In the tragic month of Muharram, one of the most significant acts is the provision of tabarruk and niyaz for Husseiniyyas worldwide.
In a world plagued by hunger and the merciless killing of Shia Muslims on a daily basis, it becomes our duty to give to those in need. Countless Husseiniyyat, Imam Bargas and centers cook meals to nourish their local communities as the masses gather to remember Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
And do you know what? The orphans and widows absolutely cherish it.
During this time of year, hundreds of thousands of orphans, widows and people living in poverty rely on niyaz and tabarruk.
Just imagine the profound impact a single plate of food, a glass of water or a bag of fruit can have.
These simple items can nourish a hungry child, bring comfort to a struggling family, and even inspire a brighter future.
However, we cannot do this alone. We need your help to create a lasting impact this Muharram.
Join us in this collective effort to provide basic necessities that every human deserves.
Make your niyaz count and donate your tabarruk now so that it can reach the Hussainis and the Zainabis of today.
Welcome back, dear viewers of Imam Hussein Charity. You are watching Al-Atash campaign. This year's Muharram campaign is called Al-Atash, and the slogan is "The thirst remains." And so we are encouraging the dear viewers at home to be able to contribute what little they have in the way of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam through majalis, through water wells, so that they can answer the call of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, but specifically now answering the call of the women and children when they cried out for thirst, be it the thirst for water, the thirst for protection, the thirst for safety. But today, inshallah, we're talking about al-Banin alayhi salam, the mother of Abil Fadl Abbas, who sacrificed her children essentially for the way of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And we're trying to relate to the story of al-Banin so that we are encouraged and to be able to connect to al-Banin, be able to contribute as well. So just a reminder to the dear viewers, if you would like to contribute and donate, the details are on your screen, in the sense that there is a QR code and there's a website that will take you to the page. The page will then give you a couple of options. One of the main options are a £50 that goes towards the majalis of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, to encourage the majalis and to grow the majalis and the mawakib, to give them the funds that they need in order to increase the food and the water and the care for the local people in Karbala and different areas of Iraq as well. There is the water campaign, so the thirst campaign, which then gives you the opportunity to provide for about 400 cups of clean, suitable water for the zuwar to drink, especially since the temperatures are so high at the moment. And there is the water well campaign, which is £1,400 goes towards a water well in the name of your marhumin, brothers and sisters. And this is one of the most important things, is that if you want to do it for your own hajat in this life, that's fantastic. But most of the time, and the contributions that we've received so far has always been in the name of the marhumin, those who have passed away, and you want to send thawab of a water well in their name, inshallah. In any case, I'm joined now in the studio by my, again, dear friend and brother, Sayyid Ali al-Nawab. Assalamu alaikum, Sayyidina.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
How are you, Sayyidina? Hope all is well?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. It's always great to have you on the show once again.
And thank you for having me.
Before the break, we were talking to Muhammad Ali Maraj specifically around mothers, but I want to now turn our attention to the motherhood of al-Banin alayhi salam. So if you can, just for the benefit of the dear viewers at home, give us an introduction into al-Banin herself alayhi salam, and I guess what significance that she had in the history of the story of Karbala.
أحسنتم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى أبد الآبدين. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. صلى الله عليك يا أبا عبد الله. Of course, when we look at prominent figures in the history of mankind, one of those prominent figures would be this great and honorable individual, this great lady. I mean, in most cases, when we think or when we investigate, we want to look for important figures, we tend to be sidelined to go towards male important figures and those individuals who left their marks, either positively, or there are individuals who negatively left some marks in the history of mankind. But in this case, I wanted to concentrate and draw the attention of our dear brothers and sisters, especially in this time of mourning, as we commemorate the brave and important sacrifices committed by those brave individuals on the land of Karbala. There were individuals who left their marks in the history of mankind, who were females, and contributed towards the end result of the events of Karbala by not being present in Karbala. So when we look at the life of Fatima bint Hizam al-Kalabiyah, otherwise known as al-Banin, as she was titled or given that title by her husband Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayh. This lady, this Fatima bint Hizam al-Kalabiyah, she was her hand was asked in marriage solely for one purpose and one purpose only. Of course, when we read about the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayh, we learn that Amir al-Mu'mineen, after Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen salawatullahi wa salamu alayha wa alayhi, he married a number of wives. Now that could be as a result of some of the political stances, as Rasulullah married some of his wives as a result of the best interest for the Islamic movement. So here Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayh, one of the individuals that he got married to after Fatima al-Zahra salamullahi alayha was this great lady. And he specifically told his brother Aqil, who was an expert in genealogy, he told him, Ya Aqil, اخطب لي امرأة أولدتها الفحولة من العرب. Amir al-Mu'mineen specifies a specific category of where and how and the background of his future wife. Why? Because he's got foresight. He's looking for he wants to get a fruit out of this marriage, which will be again a support for the Islamic movement, which was represented on that day in the year 61 AH in the movement of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And then Aqil says to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ya Ali, أين أنت من فاطمة بنت حزام الكلابية. Hizam and Bani Kilab, at that time they were well known to be brave warriors and to be very generous, from a generous clan and tribe. Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi goes, asks the hands of Fatima, and there is a story behind how before she was told that Ali ibn Abi Talib is asking your hand in marriage, she sees in her dream that the moon and stars have fallen into her lap. And she says this to her mother the next day, that, oh mother, I saw this in my dream. The mother was also a wise lady. She told her, if your dream is to become true, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant you, will gift you with 4 luminous sons who you will be well known for.
SubhanAllah.
Then her father enters upon them and says, O mother of Fatima, this is Aqil asking the hand of Fatima for his brother Ali. So this is the background of al-Banin salamullahi alayha. Fatima, al-Banin, on the day of her marriage, she comes to the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib as her tribe bring the bride to the house of the husband or the groom. She looks back and says to her father and her family members, do not leave yet. From these points, brothers and sisters, we get to know who these individuals are and why we revere them so much in this day and age, and how we can take from their lives to affect our own lives today. This newly wedded bride, she looks back and says to her family, I've got one thing. If I fulfill that thing that I want to do, if it's a good thing, I will tell you to go. If no, I don't receive the result that I want, then I will come back with you home.
Okay.
So she was so committed, and her strength and iman and belief and courage was so important, and so it was highlighted in her life that she was ready to take that stand. Because my principles go first and before everything. Okay. She enters upon the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. She sees Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib, from his wife Fatima al-Zahra. She says to them, my masters, here is what do you call it? You call it my father's wife, or my
Stepmother.
stepmother. Ahsant. So the stepmother usually, when she gets married, she wants to have dominance over the house, the full control over the house. But this lady, she turned these measurements upside down. She comes into the house and says, "Oh, my masters, do you accept me as a servant to serve you?"
SubhanAllah.
So from that day, from the first day of her life, in the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib, she sees herself as the lowest of the low in front of her husband and his children. And this teaches us a lot. They say, no, you are most revered and you are most respected. And she marries and she has a goal and she has an objective. And she knows perfectly what her goal and objective and responsibilities are in this new marriage.
Fantastic, fantastic. And this actually leads us on perfectly to, I guess, the next point in that, okay, so she's entered the house and she's made her stance clear as to what role she has in the house. So what is her role as a mother, and how did that impact the lives of her children? Her children with Imam Ali alayhi salam. So there's her stepchildren in terms of Imam Hussein, Imam Hassan, and so on. But then, what role does her stance have? Essentially, that stance of "I am a servant within this household." How does that then play into the lives of her children with Imam Ali alayhi salam?
Ahsantum. So when we look at the life of al-Banin alayhi salam, and we come to look at one of the categories of her life, which was that she was a mother. But this is one of the responsibilities. We'll come to discuss the other responsibilities or the other categories in the life of al-Banin. But when we look at this category and we underscore this category of that she was a mother and how that affected or influenced or changed the life of her children, we see that al-Banin alayhi salam, she knew that the whole and the sole purpose of her getting married to Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayhi, that Amir al-Mu'mineen wants offspring as a result of this marriage, and for that offspring to be brought up, nurtured, educated, taught all the highest levels of value in morals and ethics and bravery and courage. Basically, Amir al-Mu'mineen wants someone who is complete in every way. Not only in akhlaq, not only in ethics, not only in morals, not only in kindness, but he wants someone who will stand for justice, will stand for the implementation of Islamic values. He is someone that he practices Islamic values and implements them. Because his stance is not going to be different than the stance of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. If you want to be someone who wants to dedicate their life for a specific cause, first of all, you need to be educated on the values of that cause, and then you need to believe in the values of this cause and implement and sacrifice your life for this cause. So Fatima bint Hizam al-Kilabiyya, as a mother from the first early stages of her children's life, she made sure that she does not fail or have any shortcomings in nurturing those children to grow up with the notion of, when they stand or when they are around the children of Fatima al-Zahra salawatullahi alayha, again they see those children as their masters. As a child, Abul Fadl al-Abbas, who was the eldest of the children of al-Banin salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha wa alayhi, he, from a very early stages of his life, every time he came to stand in front of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein, he would stand or in the position of a servant waiting for his master's command. He would never sit beside Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. He would stand in front of the Imam looking down.
SubhanAllah.
And his role, his duty as a child, I'm not saying as an adult, as a child, al-Banin raised those children to have only one responsibility and one objective in life, is to serve Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. Not when he asks for something or when he wants something, but when they feel that the Imam is in need of something. And I will give an example. For example, Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas salawatullahi alayh, in one of his outings with Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and he was still a youngster, in one of the gatherings, some of the gatherings, they wanted to disrespect Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, so they didn't bring him a drink of water. But Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas salawatullahi alayh, he noticed that Imam al-Hussein salawatullahi alayh, he was licking his lips. He sensed that Imam al-Hussein is thirsty. So he went to carry a bowl of water on top of his head to bring it for Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and eventually some of that water was spilling on Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. But Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas said, I will go to any lengths as long as my brother Abi Abdullah al-Hussein is comfortable.
Absolutely amazing.
So these are the values that al-Banin, or some of the values, there are many things that al-Banin instilled in these children, but these are some of the very quick points that we can learn
Inshallah.
From al-Banin.
We're just going to pause right there, Sayyidina.
Ya Allah.
Some fantastic points, because that's going to lead us into exactly what was given and the life of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam in the tragedy of Karbala, because he always cites his mother's upbringing, and he always reminds his brothers, look, you guys are here for a purpose, and I'm here for a purpose, and that all stems from the mother's love and the mother's commitment to the cause of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. So on that note, we are going to go to our team in Iraq, the IHC team, Imam Hussein charity team in Iraq, who have another report on the ground in terms of what is happening in Karbala from a Majalis and a Mawaqib perspective. So inshallah, we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I am here on Shar al-Qibla, and you can see on my left hand side over here we have a mawqib coming down, which are representing Abu Abdullah al-Hussein and doing their azar. You can see there's drums, you can see there's so many people dressed up in costumes to reenact the tragedy of Karbala, to give you a real recreation, a reconstruction of what happened on these plains when Abu Abdullah Hussein and when his camp came here. On my right, you can see a mawqib here, which are preparing food, which will probably be served in about an hour, 2 hours time. Just after Maghrib Azan, they'll start to serve the food. These guys have been working in the heat, working in extremely difficult circumstances, but yet still are trying their best to meet the demands and help with the people that are here to commemorate, to show their grievances to Abu Abdullah Hussein, and in order for them to be fed also. Over here you can see the drums, you can see the shayukh, and it's a real atmosphere of grievances, of people coming to show their azar, to show how they are grieving for Abu Abdullah Hussein, and that they will never ever forget the tragedy of Abu Abdullah, and they will never ever let the rituals and the reconstructions and the azar of Abu Abdullah Hussein finish. So it's getting very, very loud. I'm getting pushed out everywhere. However, you can see with the costumes that they're wearing, a lot of time, a lot of effort has been put in to recreate the scenes of Karbala. But alhamdulillah, I wish you guys can come and experience this, because this happens almost every day. Every day in Karbala, there are muwaqif dressing up, reenacting. There are people doing azar, whether it's with beating their chest or with chains and things and jail, whatever, and so forth. But there's so much going on here to recreate the atmosphere, and inshallah you guys can be here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Many thanks to Sayyid Muhsin Shah, who is currently in a very, very busy Karbala street. That street particularly is always busy with zuwar, but specifically the reenactments of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, the reenactments, of the tragedy of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And so that street is called Shar al-Qibla, which is essentially the Qibla street, leading towards directly the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And the mawqib, and specifically the contributions will go towards the mawqibs that are in and around that area. And you can see that the streets were very busy. There are many zuwar. However, once again, the ingredients are limited, the funds are limited, and so they need more donations, they need more contributions to be able to service the zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So thank you to Sayyid Muhsin Shah and the rest of the IHC team in Iraq. Inshallah, we'll see more reports coming to us from them in the next couple of episodes. I turn my attention now towards Sayyid Ali once again, and before the break or before the video, we talked about al-Banin specifically kind of dissecting the reasons why she married Imam Ali alayhi salam, what was her mindset into her upbringing of her own children, and the mindset of her looking after Imam Ali's children, so i.e. Imam al-Hassan, Imam al-Hussein, and how committed she was to the cause of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Now that she's in the house and she's bringing up her children in the house of Imam Ali alayhi salam, what were the challenges that she might have faced in relation to not only her as a mother, but if we can now bring this into, I guess, the mothers in this day and age, so the widows or the mothers in Karbala, for example, what challenges do they face, especially those who are in poverty and bringing up their own children?
First, let's come to recognize that who she got married to. Fatima bint Hizam al-Kilabiyya al-Banin, she was wedded to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. And in that period that she got married to Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi alayhi, Amir al-Mu'mineen held a very important position, which was to lead the ummah. Now, everyone knows, it's very clear that the time that Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi alayhi, he was the Khalifa upon the Muslims, there was political unrest, not as a result of his leadership. So there were those opponents who did not like to see Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi in that position, because Amir al-Mu'mineen was leading them the way Rasulullah and the Holy Quran was implementing Islamic leadership, and that didn't favor, that didn't come to their taste. Because Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah alayhi, when he was, for example, distributing the wealth amongst the Muslims, he was equalizing between everyone. Because before, the predecessors, they were favoring, they had their own close companions, close friends, close relatives, who were receiving the larger sums of Baytul Mal, rather than being the Baytul Mal and the wealth of the Muslims being distributed equally between all the Muslims. So that is financially. But again, there was a political unrest. Those opponents were stirring things against Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullah alayhi. So al-Banin, in that period of time, she, in the first position, she was the wife of a leader. So she had to stand up to her duties and responsibilities. That what does Ali ibn Abi Talib want from a wife? Now, how is this wife going to be able to support her husband in these difficult situations? Not in the sense that she goes out and stands by him, but in the sense that she runs the affairs inside the house in those difficult situations, in that difficult and strict climate, to be able to support his work and responsibilities outside and inside the house. So what we learn from the life of al-Banin in regards with the widows and the single moms and the single parents is that when you are in difficult situations, you will be able to, or you will need to rather, be able to recognize that you are in a difficult situation, and then as a result of that recognition, now how am I going to deal with it? So the end result will be in my best interest. So widows today, or lone parents, or single mothers, they're living in difficult situations. They don't have a husband to stand by them. Either the husband has been killed, or the husband has been martyred, or they've been divorced, and they're a lone parent, they're a widow, they've got orphans, they've got young children. So now she has to take care of their responsibilities inside the house. Not only for providing food and drink and the daily necessities for her children. But in regards with the nurturing aspect, the upbringing aspect, feeding them the akhlaq and the teachings and the morals of and the values of Islam, instilling these values in their children, so when they tend to grow up, they become a positive asset to the community and society. So this is what al-Banin salawatullahi alayha was doing. Whether Amir al-Mu'mineen was with her inside the house, or Amir al-Mu'mineen was busy on the battlefield, in Siffin, in Nahrawan, in other battles, in Al-Jamal, al-Banin salawatullahi wa salamu alayha was always, Amir al-Mu'mineen had a clear mind that I know I've got a strong lady at home and she is taking care of my children, or she is taking care of my home. My home is intact, the fact that this lady is there. So this is one of the things that a widow or a lone parent can learn, that in times of austerity, or in times of financial difficulty, or in times that there is no sense of safety and security, as it was in the case of Ali ibn Abi Talib and al-Banin salawatullahi alayhim ajma'in. al-Banin had to study the situation in a way that she does not wait for Ali ibn Abi Talib to tell her what to do.
Yeah.
She thinks ahead. She is one step ahead. She is a alima. Not only religious knowledge, but she is alima into how to run the affairs of her life, the life of her husband, the leader, the life of her husband, the spiritual individual, and the life of her husband, the father of her children, who are going to grow up and become important individual leaders for Abi Abdullah al-Hussein.
Banin's story is also quite a sad story as well, in the sense that, when Imam Hussein left towards Karbala, and Abu Fadl Abbas and the rest of her sons left towards Karbala, she's still Hussein first and foremost. Her children, yes. Yeah. She didn't mind if they were sacrificed in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the way of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. But the sad element and the emotional element is that she was just waiting for news of her son or her stepson, Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So on that note, Sayyidina, we're going to go on to the emotional side of al-Banin's story, inshallah, after a very small break. However, just to remind the dear viewers at home, that it is very, very simple to contribute. al-Banin alayhi salam, and I'm sure Sayyid Ali will mention this, is that she is the door to our hajat. Because of her sacrifice, because of her commitment to the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, she holds a very, very special position in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are very few people in history that have done so much for Islam, that have done so much for the religion, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has more or less chosen them to be a special wasila, a special rope that we can hold on to in terms of asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our desires through these special characters. One of them is, for example, Abu Fadl Abbas. The other is al-Banin, and others, for example, could be Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam. In any case, al-Banin is known to be as a person that is a gateway to our hajat. And those of you at home who have hajat can donate and contribute in the name of al-Banin alayhi salam. And it's very, very simple to do so. The QR code is on your screen. The website is on your screen. It will take you to the page in which you're able to understand which project will resonate with you the most. If it is majalis and tabarruk for the zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, that's £50 that you can donate. If it is, for example, quenching the thirst of the zuwar of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, it is cups of water, and that's £10. That will go to approximately 400 cups of water. Or it could be Water Well campaign, which would be able to quench and nourish and service a whole village, a whole town with clean and suitable water for them to use. On that note, inshallah, we'll see you in a couple of minutes where we'll go back to Sayyid Ali and learn more about the calamities of al-Banin. So inshallah, we'll see you in a couple of minutes.
In the tragic month of Muharram, one of the most significant acts is the provision of tabarruk and niyaz for Husseiniyyas worldwide.
In a world plagued by hunger and the merciless killing of Shia Muslims on a daily basis, it becomes our duty to give to those in need. Countless Husseiniyyat Imam Bargas and centers cook meals to nourish their local communities as the masses gather to remember Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam.
And do you know what? The orphans and widows absolutely cherish it.
During this time of year, hundreds of thousands of orphans, widows, and people living in poverty rely on niyaz and tabarruk.
Just imagine the profound impact a single plate of food, a glass of water, or a bag of fruit can have.
These simple items can nourish a hungry child, bring comfort to a struggling family, and even inspire a brighter future.
However, we cannot do this alone. We need your help to create a lasting impact this Muharram.
Join us in this collective effort to provide basic necessities that every human deserves.
Make your niyaz count and donate your tabarruk now so that it can reach the Hussainis and the Zainabis of today.
Welcome back, dear brothers and sisters. You are watching Imam Hussein Charity exclusively on Imam Hussein TV 3. And today we are commemorating, we're remembering the life and lessons of Al-Baneen alayhi salam, specifically her role as a mother and her role as a mother, and how we can link her sacrifices, her commitment, her cause to the mothers of today, be them mothers living in poverty or mothers that go through difficulties wherever they are in the world. However, we are encouraging you to donate and contribute to the cause of Imam Hussein alayhi salam through the cause of motherhood, and specifically the motherhood of Baneen alayhi salam. And when we talk about Baneen alayhi salam, there are many different tragedies and emotional aspects of the life of Baneen. However, when all of her loved ones left her to go towards Karbala, i.e. Imam al-Hussein, Abil Fadl Abbas and the rest of her sons, she was sitting there alone waiting for them to return. And so the poet comes and says, Nouri Sardar, alone is what they call me when they see alone. Baneen without sons, she's alone. Not even a shadow with me alone. I have slept countless sleepless nights, only the stars provide me a light. Without my moons, and in the dimness of my nights, I cry a scream, and no one is. Without my moons, within the darkness of these nights, my wounds they bleed and are not healed. Without my moons, I weep. Only the stars witness my tears. I weep. Living in night for days and years, I weep. Not a moon to comfort my fears alone. I recall when, if I was scared, they'd come running, hearing my cries at my service. Now every day I live in fear, and not a soul comforts my heart at my service. Now at night even my shadow leaves me alone, no longer here at my service. My house was once raised by many pillars. My house, only beauty in its mirrors. My house fell with Abbas and his brothers alone. Within the absence of light, what does one become? Let me tell you, I'm so alone. When light is dim, I'm left speaking to my shadow, and it tells me I'm so alone. When there's no light, I'm left drawing my son's shadows, and they tell me I'm so alone. Shadows are all I know of happiness. Shadows draw out for me my memories. Shadows remind me that I am sunless, alone. Know that the word goodbye is harsh upon my tongue, and when you're gone, I draw the moon to pretend that my son Abbas is still with me. In his absence, I draw the moon. I sent him to battle as if I don't love him, yet when he's gone, I draw the moon. He left and saw not a tear in my eye. He left not knowing how much I would cry. He left thinking I'm smiling, he would die alone. Many thanks to the poet Nouri Sadar, and I give it now to Sayyid Ali Nawab to inshallah talk to us about the calamities of al-Bani. Bismillah.
The tragedy or the tale of sorrows of the life of al-Baneen started from the very early stages of her life in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib. For when she gave birth to Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, she knew beforehand that this child that is coming to this world, which was conceived as a result of this union between the commander of the faithfuls and the queen of devotion and emotion and values, Abbas, she knew that when he's coming to this world, he's carrying the flag and the banner of sorrows. She gave birth to Abbas like any other mother. In a moment that a mother is happy when she's carrying her newborn child towards his father, and the father is waiting restlessly to receive his newborn son. She's waiting for Ali ibn Abi Talib to say something to quench the thirst of love and emotion that she's waiting for. Ali takes Abbas, wrapped in that cloth. As soon as Abbas feels the warmth of the arms of his father, the valiant, the brave lion, he takes his arms out of those wrappings. His bareless arms. He's waving his arms in the face of his father. He's looking directly to the eyes of Ali. It's as if Abbas is saying, Ya Ali, oh father, I know why I have come to this world. And I cannot bear to see the luminous eyes of my brother Hussein and the warm touches of my sister Zainab, to comfort her heart and to say to her, oh Zainab, do not worry, your supporter is here. But then al-Baneen doesn't fail to recognize and realize that Ali, as soon as he sees the arms of Abbas, he starts crying. She says, oh Ali, is there anything wrong with my child? Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Ya al-Baneen, I am looking at these arms which will be severed on the plains of Karbala. The caravan of Hussein is getting ready to leave Medina. Ah, Ya al-Baneen. She was melting in love for Hussein. As we said, she saw herself as a maid and her children as servants to Abi Abdullah. So before the caravan sets to sail towards Karbala, she calls Abbas and she says, oh Abbas, Waladi Abbas, do not forget what I have been teaching you all your life. Be careful, you let Zainab to be touched by the winds of Karbala. They leave. al-Baneen remains in Medina, waiting for a news. Although she has been given some indications that this was the last time you are seeing your sons, O al-Baneen. They go to Karbala. But when does she next receive news of the death of her children is when that poet Bishr ibn Hadlam comes running towards the grave of Rasulullah saying, Ya Ahla Yathrib, La muqama lakum biha. Why, O Bishr, what's happened? Why are you saying to us, leave Medina? Medina is no longer a safe haven for you. He told them, I will give you the news. Next to the grave of Rasulullah, they all gather. Everyone, male, female, young, adult, children, they run towards the grave of Rasulullah. Bishr ascends the pulpit and says, Ya Ahla Yathrib, La muqama lakum biha. قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار الجسم منه بكربلاء مضرج والرأس منه على القناة يدار. In that situation he realizes an elderly lady carrying a child who's running towards her. It's as if she's saying, Ya nas balla dafrujul, open the way for me, خلوه ينزل عن ظلول أنا بسايلة واستمع قوله يوم التقوا ذولا وذولا عباس راع الزود يولا. I want to ask you, O Bishr, about my master Hussein, and if Abbas was loyal on the plains of Karbala. He asked, who is this lady asking me about Abbas? They told her, this is al-Baneen, al-Abbas wa ikhwati. He was baffled. He didn't know what to say, whether to say to her about the death of her children or not. He said to her, Ya al-Baneen,
عظم الله لك الأجر بأولادك. She said, I did not ask you about my sons. I am asking you about my beloved of my heart, Hussein. Tell me about Hussein. He then says, Ya al-Banin, عظم الله لك الأجر بولدك يا بالفضل. It is then the narrators narrate, the child fell to the ground. She placed her hand on her back and she said, Ya Bishr, لقد قطعت نياط قلبي. You have ripped my heart apart. Tell me about my son Hussein. Is he safe and well? It is then, brothers and sisters, that this honorable, devoted lady received the shocking news of the death of Hussein. Bishr said, Ya al-Banin, هذا جسم الحسين على الثرى ورأسه يدار بين البلدان. It is then al-Banin raised her hand and shouted, Wa walada, wa Husayna. She used to come to the cemetery of Baqi, build 5 graves and mourn the death of her son. And she used to recite these lines. It's as if she was saying, لا تدعوني ويك البنين تذكريني باليوث العرين كانت بنون ليدعى بهم. Once upon a time I had brave luminous sons, but do not call me al-Banin anymore. Every day she would sit down and wait for the arrival of the caravan. She heard that Lady Zainab has entered the city of Medina. She ran towards the house of Abi Abdullah. She knocked on the door. The maid came to Lady Zainab saying, Oh my lady, there is a lady by the door. What does she want? She says, I am your partner in Azana, sharikatukum fil musab. Lady Zainab said, this is my mother, al-Banin. Open the door for her. As soon as al-Banin sees Lady Zainab, recognizes Zainab, she shouts, Wa walada, wa Husayna. Lady Zainab cries, Wa kha, wa Abbasa. نذر علي لئن عادوا وإن رجعوا لأزرعن طريق الطائف ريحانا.
إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Sayyid Ali, thank you very, very much for your time. عظم الله أجورك, طيب الله أنفاسك. And inshallah we'll see you in the next episodes of the Thirst Al-Atash campaign on Imam Hussein, charity exclusively on Imam Hussein TV. And with that, inshallah, we'll leave you with footage of the holy land of Karbala and details of how you can contribute to the cause of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. And inshallah, we'll see you in the next episodes. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أمتي يا سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. A second of your loudest salawat in honor of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman. قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم أعلم أمتي بعدي بسنتي والقضاء علي بن أبي طالب. صدق رسول الله وآمنا به. نوروا مجالسكم بذكر محمد وآل محمد. Ahibai, you find within the books of the Maqatil that on the eve of Ashura, Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Abu Abdullah al-Hussein gathered all his companions into a single tent. And he then began to deliver a khutbah, a sermon, where he addressed his companions by saying, Inni la a'lamu ashaban awfa minkum. I do not know of any companions who are much more loyal than you are. And when a Ma'soom Imam says, I do not know, it is not an indication that the Imam is ignorant or doesn't have information, wal-ayadhu billah. Rather, it is an eloquent style of saying that there absolutely does not exist since the creation of mankind for any Nabi and for any Wasi a group of companions who were much more loyal to their Prophet or to their Imam in the way that you have exhibited loyalty towards me. And it becomes instrumental and it becomes necessary upon us to study and to contemplate the life and the biographies of these companions that went on to become bit higher? Just a bit, sorry. Perfect. Amazing. Shukran. And so it becomes absolutely necessary upon us to study and to contemplate the biographies of these companions of Imam al-Hussein, who then went on to rewrite the course of history for eternity. These men whom Imam al-Sadiq Ruhi Lahul Fida teaches us to address them by saying, Bi abi anta wa ummi. May my mother and my father be sacrificed for you. Tibtum wa tabat al-ardu allati fiha dufintum. The Ma'soom Imam says to us the reality of these companions who were sacrificed with Imam al-Hussein. The Ma'soom Imam says this land of Karbala, with the greatness that Karbala has, the Ma'soom Imam says that this land of Karbala, its greatness and its grandeur was increased because your bodies were buried on this pure, or buried within this pure earth. And based on this, Ahba'i, I would like to discuss with you a particular aspect from the biography of this grand companion of Imam al-Hussein by the name of Burayr ibn Khudayr. And you may remember years back in 2018 or so that we had delivered a similar lecture that was focused on the biography of Burayr. And I will recap in a minute or so, highlight some of the points that we had discussed in that majlis, and then move on to the point of focus for tonight's lecture. From amongst the characters and the distinctive personality of Burayr, who was a companion of Imam al-Hussein, is that being a resident of Mecca, when he heard that Imam al-Hussein has left Medina and is going towards Mecca, Burayr, as a resident of Kufa, left Kufa during or just before the arrival of Imam Muslim bin Aqil and caught up with Imam al-Hussein and met Imam al-Hussein in Mecca. Which means that Burayr was witness to a great part of the 120 odd days that Imam al-Hussein lived in Mecca, laying the foundation for the Meccan aspect of the revolution, as we will see inshallah in the next couple of nights. Burayr was a company and was by the side of Imam al-Hussein at that point. Prior to this, we also have that within the character of Burayr is that the books of Rijal describe Burayr as being Sayyidul Qurra, that Burayr was at the peak when it came to the recitation of the Quran, in that he recited the Holy Quran with the highest level in terms of the respect and the grandeur that is due to the Holy Quran as a book revealed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we pointed out in that lecture years ago that within the literature of Ahlul Bayt, when you come across the term Qurra al-Quran, or the reciter of a Quran, a reciter of a Quran is a definition that is not restricted to the recitation of the Quran through tartil and tajweed. It is an important aspect of it, and it is a part of it, but is not restricted to it. And in fact, within the literature of Ahlul Bayt, we have that the Qurra al-Quran and the recitation of Quran entails understanding what is being recited in the Quran, contemplating over what is recited within the Quran, and then laying the foundation for implementing the teachings that are laid within the Quran. Hence, you will find numerous hadith that state the adab and the akhlaq of how to be seated and how to engage whilst the Quran is being recited. Hadith al-Sharif by Imam Hussein al-Mujtaba, Sayyid Shabab Ahl al-Jannah, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh, states that there is not narration on the authority of the Imam that states that there was not a single time that the Imam recited the Quran, except that if he ever came through a verse that talked about the verses of Jahannam and the intensity of the punishment on the day of judgment, Imam Hasan al-Mujtaba would weep and would contemplate and seek forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For you find that in addition to this, the tafsir of the Quran, as we had mentioned, is absolutely important. And I reinstate this point that was reinstated years ago, Shabab, we need to create a culture within our communities where we understand the tafsir of the Holy Quran through the hadith of Ahlul Bayt. For the verses or for the aspects of tafsir from the literature of Ahlul Bayt that has reached us. There is tons of literature in terms of understanding the Quran through the hadith of Ahlul Bayt. And great examples of these are the tafsir of Imam Hussein al-Askari. بغض النظر, without looking at the fact that there may be a discrepancy on the attribution of this tafsir to the Imam or not, even though a greater amount of the scholars are of the opinion, have established the attribution of this tafsir to Imam Hassan al-Askari. And similarly, tafsir al-Burhan and tafsir al-Safi. It is important that those of us who are working within the field of tabligh rally together resources to ensure that tafsir through the hadith of Ahlul Bayt are readily and freely available to the masses, because there is no better way to understand the Quran Samit other than through the Quran Natiq. Then we also went on to say that Burayr was from those people who was from the Ubad. He was from the Zuhad. He was from those who had dedicated their lives to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and were totally detached from the shackles of materialism that governed the community of the time. This, in a nutshell, is what we mentioned years ago when it came to the Majlis of Burayr. For tonight, the point that I would like to centralize upon is that in addition to all these credentials that Burayr possessed, you find within the books of Rijal, it is narrated that Burayr was also an author. So in addition to being a person who has memorized the Quran, understands tafsir of the Quran, who was teaching Quran in Kufa, in addition to the fact that he was a staunch worshipper in that he spent his days in prayers and nights while fasting, in addition to the fact that he was a warrior of the staunchest level on the day of Ashura, he was also an author. And you can imagine, as we said last night in the majlis of Imam Muslim bin Aqil, the different fields in which the students of Amirul Mu'mineen became masters at the same time. Generally, you find within the societies that we live, it is very hard to specialize in more than a single field. You cannot be, the best you can be is perhaps a jack of all trades, but you cannot be a master and a specialist in multiple disciplines. It's very rare for you to find somebody who could be at the highest level of bravery as a warrior and at the same time also be one of the most eloquent speakers or must be one of the most profound authors. The manhaj of tahqiq and authoring a book is very different than the manhaj, for example, of specializing in medicine or specializing in contact sport, for example. However, you find that from the grandeur of Amirul Mu'mineen and those Shi'as of Amirul Mu'mineen is that Amirul Mu'mineen nurtured them to be specialists and masters in multiple disciplines at the same time. And this is one of the khususiyat of the Shi'at of Amirul Mu'mineen. For you find that Burayr was the author of a treatise, of a book, of a treatise known as the Treatise of a Judiciary System. Now, when you refer back to the books of Ilm al-Rijal, you will see that it is narrated that for Burayr, kana lahu aslun. The term that is used for a book is the word asl. And I must take a moment over here, Bain al-Qawsayn, for those of you who are interested or those of you who are involved in higher Islamic studies, that within the field of Ilm al-Rijal, there is a difference between the word kitab and the word asl. There are many companions of the Imams, from the time of Amirul Mu'mineen all the way to the companions of Imam Hassan al-Askari, and in fact from the companions of Maulana Sahib al-Amri wa Zaman, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif, who authored books in terms of the narrations that emanated from the Ma'soom Imam. For when you come across the study and you are analyzing Islamic literature, when you come across the fact that a Fulan companion and ex-companion of the Imam authored a kitab, kitab means that he has narrated or he has written down traditions he has written down traditions from a Ma'soom Imam. However, it is not necessary that he heard the tradition from the Ma'soom Imam directly. He is narrating the tradition from the Ma'soom Imam by way of one or two intermediaries. Yani between the author and the Ma'soom Imam, he has heard the narration from one or two people. As opposed to an asl. An asl is a book that is authored by a companion of the Imam, where the content of the book is not through an intermediary. Rather, he has sat with the Imam, heard from the Imam directly, and has then gone on to write a book. And making a distinction between an asl and a kitab has a great impact when it comes to understanding the ranks of the Rawis, the position of the Rawi when it comes to the Imam, and it also plays an important role in understanding the grading of the credibility and the credential of that book. Hence, this distinction is absolutely important to make. For you have that Burayr was the author of an asl, meaning that he authored a book based on the hadith and the experiences that he lived when it came to construction of a judiciary infrastructure directly from Imam Amirul Mu'mineen and directly from Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba. If we understand this, you find that the world of judiciary and the judiciary system is absolutely central and key for any successful government. Therefore, when you come and you find hadith that are narrated by numerous or by a number of the A'imma in regards to Imam al-Hujjah, they say Imam, who is the Imam al-Mahdi, you find within the descriptions الَّذِي يَمْلَأُ الْأَرْضَ عَدْلًا وَقِسْطًا كَمَا مُلِئَتْ ظُلْمًا وَجَوْرًا, that the Imam al-Mahdi is the one who will finally set up a government of peace and justice. Peace and justice, just like the way the earth has been filled with injustice and oppression. This global government of peace and justice that will be established by the Imam, and this global capital being in Kufa, as we will see in the couple of nights that are in front of us. The basis of a global government of peace and justice is built upon a judiciary system that has the ability and the capacity to dispense justice amongst all the citizens of the state without any sort of bias. Which is why, when it comes to the principles of Islamic governance, for us as Shia Ithna Ashari, we believe that a judiciary system that deals with criminal law, that deals with civil law, that deals with political disputes, that deals with the derivation of a legislation on how to maintain law and order, the basis of these jurisprudential teachings in regards to a judiciary emanates from a divine power that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and conveyed to us by the Ma'soom Imam. And if you think about it, in any country with any man-made law, where does the judiciary, what is the history of a judiciary system? What is the history of how criminal cases are dealt with? What is the history or the basis upon which civil law is built and then dispensed? You will find that the fundamental difference between a government of a Ma'soom Imam and a man-made judiciary system is that one law emanates from an infallible divine source, while the other is formulated over years and years of trial and error and is still subject to error, inefficiency and corruption. And you will find that there were two governments in the history of mankind in which justice has been dispensed at an unparalleled level. The government of Rasulullah and the government of Maulana Amirul Mu'mineen Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayh. And to give you an example, you will find that the government of Amirul Mu'mineen, as we had mentioned a few nights back, after the battle of Jamal with Aisha, the Islamic capital was moved from Medina al-Munawwara towards Kufa. And you know, Kufa, between brackets, Bain al-Qawsayn, Kufa has great importance as a city from the history of mankind. In fact, you have that the first mosque to be built on earth, the first mosque in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was worshipped on earth was Masjid al-Kufa. This is not to take away from the grandeur of Makkah al-Mukarramah or the grandeur of the Kaaba. But you will notice when you enter into Masjid al-Kufa, and this is taken from the traditions of Ahlul Bayt, when you visit Masjid al-Kufa, and may Allah Azza wa Jal grant each and every one of us an opportunity to visit Masjid al-Kufa and to perform the ziyarah of Maulana Amirul Mu'mineen. Masjid al-Kufa, bracket within a bracket, Masjid al-Kufa is one of those places on earth where you have the choice between reciting your salat either as qasr or full, even if you are staying for less than 10 days. Masjid al-Kufa is one of those masajid where the thawab of reciting one salat is equivalent to an umrah. Masjid al-Kufa is one of those places because of its grandeur. The hadith narrate, depending on the type of salat you are reciting, the thawab of one salat or one rak'ah is equivalent to a hajj. Ya Ali, who would not want to recite Salat in Masjid al-Kufa? At the end of the day, Masjid al-Kufa is where our Mawla recited Salat. Every inch of the land of Masjid al-Kufa, if you were to smell with the fragrance of it, if you were to smell, you would find a fragrance of Aqidah, a fragrance that may not be captured by the physical nose, a fragrance that is captured through the Aqidah in your heart, and wallahi, you can smell the musk that emanates from the feet of Amirul Mu'mineen in Masjid al-Kufa. In any case, this Masjid al-Kufa, you have that during the apparent Khilafah of Amirul Mu'mineen, not only was Masjid al-Kufa the center and the basis from which he led the Salatul Jama'ah, but Masjid al-Kufa was also the supreme court whereby Amirul Mu'mineen headed the entire judiciary system from. And you notice when you go to Masjid al-Kufa, there is a part of Masjid al-Kufa known as Dikkatul Qadha. Dikkatul Qadha, yani the square of the judiciary. And the historians have it that Amirul Mu'mineen would sit at this very spot, which is why when you go to Masjid al-Kufa, it is mustahab for you to recite a 2 rakat salat at Dikkatul Qadha. It is right next to Dikkatul Tasht. This entire area between Dikkatul Qadha and Dikkatul Tasht represented the High Court or the Supreme Court, where the head of the judiciary, who was also the head of state, Amirul Mu'mineen, would dispense justice between people. Justice in a manner that human history has not seen. And an incident comes to mind over here. At one time, during the Khilafah, apparent Khilafah of Amirul Mu'mineen, a young man came to Amirul Mu'mineen and he said to him, Ya Amirul Mu'mineen, he's head of state, Ya Amirul Mu'mineen, my father went out on a business expedition with 3 other men. And it was a joint venture, using today's terminology. It was a joint venture. Each of them had invested a certain amount of capital. They were supposed to go out to the different cities. They were supposed to trade and come back with their profits. Now, these 3 partners of my father, they claim that my father died somewhere in the journey, and that from this business expedition or this business trip, this joint venture, they have not made any profit. They didn't report any profit. I feel, Ya Amirul Mu'mineen, that these men are lying to me, and I have not had an opportunity to seek justice because they had gone to Shuray al-La'in. Shuray was one of those judges that were appointed from the time of Bani Saqifa, and he played a crucial role in giving out fatwas for the execution of Muslim bin Aqil and the execution and the killing of Imam Hussein in Karbala. It just goes to show you sometimes a person who is in a high position of authority is not free from the reins of shaitan. In any case, he says, Shurayh was unable to put forward my case, didn't lend me a proper hearing within the court, and I have come to you, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, to seek justice. Amir al-Mu'mineen, this also goes to show you, every point of these historical narrations, ahibai, are lessons, and for students, Intum Shabab of Manchester, a place that is home to one of the greatest universities in Europe, if not in the world. Those of you who are specializing in political science, in principles of governance, it is absolutely imperative for you to take time and study the principles of Islamic governance under the government of Amirul Mu'mineen. The historians mention, look at this, a young man, a citizen of the state, was able to approach the head of state without any sort of barrier, without any sort of formality, without any sort of protocol. There was no barrier between the leader of the nation and the people of the nation. The leader of the nation lives amongst the people. The leader of the nation is accessible amongst the people. There is no entourage that is employed to be a barrier between the people and the head of state. Refer back to the hadith. The shab, this young man, went and with all freedom and with all confidence had the ability to go to the head of state and actually make a complaint against another judge and another magistrate without having any fear of repercussion. These are lessons to be taken on board, and this is a type of governance that we need to teach the world, that this is what the world lost out when they abandoned Eid al-Ghadir. And on the other hand, we need to make people motivated and to look forward that this is the government that the awaited Mahdi is going to come and establish. He comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he puts forward his complaint. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to him, and we shall dispense for you justice in a manner that has never been dispensed except through the Anbiya of the past. Amir al-Mu'mineen makes an announcement for all the citizens of Kufa who are present to make themselves available and witness this hearing and witness this case or this trial in court. Court being Dikkat al-Qadha in Masjid al-Kufa. The narration mentions the entire masjid was filled with people. Amir al-Mu'mineen then called one of his companions, and he had, Amir al-Mu'mineen, as the head of state, had a faculty from the faculty of the government, a governmental tool known as Shurtatul Khamis, who were in charge of maintaining law and order to a certain extent within the Islamic empire. They were not a military police. They were not like these Amra bil Ma'ruf Wahhabi police that existed. Abadan la. In any case, talking about Shurtatul Khamis if we get an opportunity in the future. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks for a number of people within the Shurtatul Khamis to go and bring these three partners, bring these three men who were business partners with the father of this boy who has died under mysterious conditions. Under mysterious conditions. They bring these three men. They've been summoned to court. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, for each of these three men, cover their heads with a cloth. Put a cloth over their head. And each of these three men, send them to the three different istiwanas inside of Masjid al-Kufa. Istiwana is basically the maqams inside of Masjid al-Kufa. So you have the maqam of Nabi Ibrahim, you have the maqam of Imam Sajjad, you have the maqam of Nabi Adam. These are known as the istiwanas, maqams you can say. So Amir al-Mu'mineen said these three people, cover their heads with a cloth and isolate them. Make them go stand in different parts of the mosque at different maqams. Amir al-Mu'mineen then sat at the Dikkat al-Qadha. He then said to the people, when I tell you to recite a takbir and I say Allahu Akbar, I expect all of you who are present at this court, who are witnessing this trial, to repeat the takbir after me. Keep in mind, the narration doesn't mention this, but what is understood from the context is that the people, if not in their thousands, at the minimum were in their hundreds. You can imagine, even if on the assumption that there were 100 people reciting salawat in the loudest of their voices. Like inshallah salawat, I'm sure we are more than 100. If you can grace the majlis with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So you can imagine that takbir and the salawat is to be recited in this manner, or they recited a takbir. 100 people reciting takbir in the loudest of voices. Tayyib. Amir al-Mu'mineen calls forward one of these three men for interrogation in front of the judge. Now notice that there is a claim that has been made that the three of them were traveling in a faraway land. This man has died, and they buried him, and they didn't make any profits. You have the head of judiciary who is trying to proceed over this case in the absence of witnesses, because even if there were witnesses, they are not present in the city of Kufa. Notice how Amir al-Mu'mineen salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayhi presides over this case, and you begin to see the importance and the instrumentality of a ma'soom being at the helm of a governmental institution. Amir al-Mu'mineen brings the first man forward. They say, take off your cloth. He take off the cloth. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks him, these are people who have been summoned to court without any prior warning. So he asks him, number one, in which month, in which day did you people leave for your business venture together? The man replies, on Fulan day. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks him, in which month did you go? He says, in Fulan month. He says, in which year did you guys travel? He says, in XYZ year. He then goes on to say, did you guys make a profit or did you not make a profit? He says, we did not make a profit. He asks him, how much was the capital that each and every one of you put within this business venture? The man gives them the amounts. And then Amir al-Mu'mineen says to the people, I want you to recite a takbir after me. So the man, Amir al-Mu'mineen asks the man, in which city or in which country or in which town, where in your travel did this man first exhibit signs of sickness? The man said, in Fulan town. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Allahu Akbar. Behind him in the mosque, hundreds if not thousands of people simultaneously in one voice recite, Allahu Akbar. The other two men who are standing on the different parts of the istiwana and their faces are covered with cloth are now beginning to tremble. They don't know what is happening. They cannot hear the questions and the answers between Amir al-Mu'mineen and their first companion. But all they do is they randomly hear over 1,000 people do takbir at the same time. So they begin to get worried. Amir al-Mu'mineen continues the questioning of this person. He says to him, how long was your colleague sick for? The man said, X number of days. Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Allahu Akbar. 1,000 people behind him repeat the takbir. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks him, on which day did he die? The person says, on X day. Amir al-Mu'mineen gives a takbir. 1,000 people behind him do what? Allahu Akbar, the takbir. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks him, when he died, in whose house did he die? He says, in Fulan man's house. Amir al-Mu'mineen does a takbir. What does the crowd do? Takbir. Amir al-Mu'mineen asks him, who gave him the ghusl? Who gave him the kafan? Who lowered him into the grave? This man keeps answering. And at the time that every answer is given, Amir al-Mu'mineen does a takbir, and behind him 1,000 people are doing takbir. The other two people who were sharik in this story begin to panic, and they began to assume that the first person has ratted them out. Amir al-Mu'mineen didn't do anything. Finished this person's interrogation. Commanded for the cloth to be put on his face, around his face. Take him to another side of the mosque. They all recited takbir together. He said, bring me the second person who was with this caravan of 3 business or 4 businessmen together. They bring the second person. He is now visibly trembling in front of Amir al-Mu'mineen. They order for the cloth to be removed from his face. He's shivering in front of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Amir al-Mu'mineen says to him, do you think we do not know what you people have been up to? Amir al-Mu'mineen performs the takbir. 1,000 people behind him recite takbir. The man caved in and all of a sudden began to confess, and he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, I promise you that man didn't die by himself, but we killed him, and I was the one who was actually opposing my 2 colleagues. Confession that was made in a case of the highest order. And it is over here that Amir al-Mu'mineen then called these 3 men. They were charged guilty for the murder of the father of this young man, and the capital and the profits that were earned were given back to them because they had plotted between them that they will kill this person and equally distribute the additional profits between them. For you find that the judiciary aspect, and you find over here a very great important lesson as well. If you were to ponder over this entire case that Amir al-Mu'mineen presided over, you will find that Amir al-Mu'mineen employed nothing less than human psychology to ensure that 3 criminals who were partner in crime not only would confess to the crime, but would turn upon each other. Amir al-Mu'mineen used the human psychology. And from here we understand that human psychology is a fundamental qualification that is to be possessed by anyone who takes the office within a judiciary system as a judge or a magistrate. And when I say human psychology, I don't mean human psychology that is taught through the philosophy of an atheistic culture. There is a field of Islamic human psychology, because nobody understands man better than Amir al-Mu'mineen and Rasulullah himself. The judiciary system, Ahibai, if you understand, is the bedrock and the foundation of a stable and a successful government. If you understand this, we now move back and we come to the issue of Burair. Burair is an author of a judiciary system, the principles of a judiciary system as per the hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen and the hadith of Imam Hussein al-Mujtaba. We begin to understand the status that Burair had amongst the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Again, when you delve into the field of Ilm al-Rijal, you begin to understand that even the companions of the Imams, just like the companions of Rasulullah, are of different statuses, are of different darajat. A companion who narrates a hadith in regards to 1 or 2 etiquettes that are mustahab, with all due respect to mustahab acts, and the idea is not to bring anything down from the deen, but for us to understand that there is darajat, there are statuses when it comes to ilm al-rijal and when it comes to accrediting men and understanding the credibility of men within their role of conveying Islamic literature. There is a stark difference between a companion and a narrator who narrates issues such as the principles of a judiciary system. This man is very different from the one who will narrate a hadith in regards to the istihbab of eating a certain food during a certain day of the week. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Ya Ali. Ya Ali. Allahu Akbar. Ya Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah. Ya Ali. Ya Ali. Jazakumullah, may Sayyid al-Shuhada himself reward each and every one of you. I know it's difficult to sit in a place and you guys are all crammed together, but in every moment of inconvenience that you experience, inshallah, there are malaika writing for you the highest level of rewards. I'll tell you one thing, and I say this all the time, and our teachers in the Hawza say this. To experience inconvenience in the way of Imam al-Hussein is an honor. It is an honor. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So you understand that when it comes to the world of Ilm al-Rijal, that even companions who are called, or companions who are categorized as being credible companions, thiqa, the term that is used for credible, it has darajat and it has stations and it has different levels. The credibility of a companion that is narrating or that has authored an asal as opposed to a kitab, and you remember the difference between them, who has authored an asal in regards to an issue as complex as the principles of a judiciary system, his ranking in terms of his diligence, in his ability, in his iman, in his yaqeen, in terms of his proximity towards the imam, in these darajat, he is much higher. I should not say taqwa, because taqwa doesn't have to say do anything over here. Iman, in the sense that proximity towards the imam is far greater than the person who narrates a hadith in regards to the istihbab of eating a certain food during a certain day of the week. The weight and the impact of that narration within our lives are different, and the one who is trusted with something weightier has a higher level of darajat. Which is why in Ilm al-Rijal, Ahibba, between brackets, we begin to say that when you come across books of Ilm al-Rijal where a narrator or a rawi is categorized as being thiqa or not a thiqa, the issue is not as binary as 1 or 0. La, even within the field of thiqa categorization of being credible, there are darajat. And you find that Burayr was of the highest level in this sense. This is one. The book of Burayr has not reached us. In this day and age, the book of Burayr has not reached us. And like tons of literature that showcased the heritage and the teachings of Ahlul Bayt that were destroyed over a period of time, the kitab or the asl of Burayr was also destroyed. However, what we are able to understand is the content of the book of Burayr that includes the principles of a judiciary system, includes and is the base of which a number of judiciary issues mentioned within the books of jurisprudence reflect in this day and age. So for example, you find that if you were to go to a preliminary text such as Shara'i al-Islam of Muhakkik al-Hilli, rahmatullah alayh, you find that within Kitabul Qadha, the book of judges, the magistrate, a section or a chapter of how a judiciary system looks like within an Islamic government, you find a number of sifat characters, qualities, and the qualifications that need to be possessed by a single person before he claims to be a judge or can be appointed as a judge or a magistrate within the context of a government. You find that from amongst the conditions that are over there, that the first condition of a qadi is that he has absolute knowledge of the Quran and the Ahlul Bayt, because the basis of your judiciary giving a verdict in criminal law or in civil law has to have roots that go back either to the Quran or roots to the Ahlul Bayt. And if it goes back to the Quran, it can only go back to the Quran if your understanding of the Quran is taken from the words of Ahlul Bayt. In fact, we have hadith in Wasa'il al-Shia where Imam as-Sadiq Ruhi lahul Fida and instructs the Shias that if you were to have a civil dispute amongst yourselves, do not go to the judges of the kuffar, do not go to the judiciary system of our enemies. Rather, choose from amongst your person man yata'allam or man allama shay'an min qadayana. A person, refer back to the person and take him to be as a judge who has learnt something from our teachings of a judiciary system. And hence we understand within the framework of political theory that within the school of Shia Ithna Ashari, a judge cannot qualify to be a judge until and unless he is an expert in the fields of Hadith and Quran as per the teachings of Ahlul Bayt. Which is why you come and you find that a number of Maraja who write commentaries on Shara al-Islam of Muhakkik al-Hilli have come forward and have said in this day and age, it means that you cannot qualify as a judge or a magistrate until and unless you are a marja or you are a mujtahid in its entirety. Mujtahid mutlaq, yani ijtihad mutlaka, and not even ijtihad which is partial or juz'i. You find that the books of judiciary that talk about the principles of a judiciary, you will find, for example, the roles of a judge and a magistrate are outlined within the books of fiqh that are again taken from the hadith. So for example, did you know that a part of the function of the judiciary system as per the teachings of Ali Muhammad, one of the functions of a judge is that he does not only preside over criminal cases or civil cases, but do you know that on a daily basis it is the responsible of the judge or the magistrate of that appointed locality or that district, it is a mandatory duty upon him to designate a certain part of his day where the judge is responsible for expediting the cases of those individuals who have been accused of a crime but are still waiting trial. If you notice, in majority of the Western countries, there are a number of people who have been arrested, in their thousands and in their thousands, people who have been arrested, and they are in prisons, and they are in a holding cell or in incarceration, and they are awaiting for their trial. And what happens is that if you look at it from a political perspective, this starts to create pressure on the government, because number one, the government needs to put in resources to build jails and then to employ the police force or to employ prison guards and to ensure that they are fed and to ensure that their human rights are given to them. And this exhausts the taxpayers the jizya, and you have the land tax that has its ahkam that are particular towards it. But it's in the teachings of Amirul Mu'mineen are so stringent that government reasons from the hard work and the sweat of the people cannot be used in measure where to actually find out how many people in his locality and in his district are within temporary prisons and are awaiting for trial. and whether the reason the trial being delayed is because the witnesses are not there or the witnesses were sick or so on and so forth, there is a daily update and follow-up by the judge and the magistrate. And if he fails in this responsibility, he is accountable to the head of the judiciary, either the judge on top of him or to the head of state directly. Do you know a second function within the judiciary system, as taught by the principles of Ahlul Bayt, is that one of the primary responsibilities, in addition to the two that we have mentioned, of a judge or a magistrate, is to ensure that court, and there is an assessment done of administering the financial affairs of the orphan. Meaning that in this day and age, if we have children, for example, whose parents are victim of war, whether they died due to acts of terrorism, whether they died because their parents were serving or their fathers were serving in the army, rather world today, where do you have? You have children become served and give their lives to protect. So celebrate within the army gave their lives. Children, their wives are sleeping on the streets and the state don't give a damn about them. Government of Mu'mineen absolutely different. The understanding of a judiciary system right thing or no, remember the words of Hur and repeat it to yourself. You have the choice through the act that you are going to make, the action that you're going to embark upon, either to select Jannah or Jahannam. What are you going to do? Hur says, I shall not choose anything over paradise. He took his son Bukair and went towards the camp of Imam Hussein. The narration mentions that when Hur was walking towards the tent of Imam Hussein, Hur turned his spear upside down and he turned his entire armor upside down, because it was within the legacy, or it was within the heritage or the culture of Arab warfare at that time, that if you turn your spear inside out, upside down, and you wear your armor inside out, it is a sign of surrender. So Hur, with all humility with his son, comes towards Imam al-Hussein. And the narrations mention that Imam al-Hussein looked at him and he said, who is this? Hur replied back by saying, I am Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi, and I have come to seek tawbah, I have come to seek repentance from you, for indeed I was the one who stopped you on the way to Kufa and forced you to come into Karbala, and it is because of my decision that your women and your children have been hungry and thirsty for 3 days. Ya Aba Abdullah, the cry of the children, Al-Atash is due to me. Is there any forgiveness? Into Mahibai, you're sitting in the majlis of the most generous and the most Kareem Imam Sayyid al-Shuhada. After all this, Imam al-Hussein looks at Hur and he says to him, your repentance is accepted by me and by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How Kareem is this Imam al-Hussein? The historians mention that Hur fell on the feet of Imam al-Hussein and began to kiss the dust under the feet of Imam al-Hussein. Hur together with his son Bukair. The historians also mention in the Arbabul Maqatil, if you were to compile the traditions together, do you know that Hur displayed one of the highest levels of courage and bravery as a warrior on the day of Ashura? Hur entered into the battlefield and was engaged in combat at 7 different occasions on the day of Ashura. 7 times Hur entered into the battlefield and created and caused the catastrophe that led the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad to retreat on multiple occasions. 7 times. The Maqatil mention the first time Hur went into the battlefield together with his son Bukair. The Maqtal then mentions that Hur went into the battlefield on 3 different occasions in solo one-on-one combats. And from these 3 one-on-one combats, in 1 combat alone, Hur was responsible for sending 280 of those mal'oons into Jahannam wa bi'sal masir. 3 times Hur went into the battlefield in single combat. Once Hur went into the battlefield with his son Bukair. They were fighting side by side. That's 4. Number 5, the narrations mention that Hur in the general attack formed the lines within the left wing and fought under the command of Habib ibn Madahir, such that the Maqtal mentions, and this is within Sunni narrations, the Maqtal, which is Maqtal, aspects of a Maqtal that is narrated from Sunni books, it is narrated that the left wing under the command of Habib ibn Madahir and Hur, who was fighting under the command of Habib, was so staunch that that wing of Imam al-Hussein turned a defensive approach into a counter approach of attack. The narration states that these 30 to 40 men within the left wing forced an army of over 3,000 led by Shimr to retreat. Hur fought in single combat 3 times, fought with his son Bukair, fought in the left wing under the command of Habib ibn Madahir. 5. The 6th time Hur went into battle is when Imam al-Hussein changed the strategy of the battle into dual combats. 2 people, 2 on 2. And we have within our maqtal that Hur, in one of these dual battles, Hur went out with Zuhair ibn al-Kayn, and they were fighting side by side until they pushed the army to the furthest part of the battleground. It is only when the armies came and separated between Hur and Zuhair ibn al-Kayn that they retreated and returned back to the Khaymaga. The seventh attack of Hur, when he went into combat into the battlefield, is after Salatul Dhuhr, when he eventually became Shaheed. The Maqtal mentions that in one of these combats, when Hur was fighting with his son Bukair. In fact, before I go into Hur and Bukair, do you know that while Hur was fighting in these one-on-one combats, he delivered a sermon rebuking the people of Kufa for their shameful act of inviting the Imam and then fighting against him. The khutbah of Hur was so powerful. The brother of Hur, Mus'ab, who was in the ranks of Umar ibn Sa'ad, came running forward. The people, Umar ibn Sa'ad and Shimr bin Diljoshan, thought that these two brothers who are in different camps are going to fight and kill each other. The brother of Hur came running across. He hugged Hur and he said to him, "Brother, you have guided me on a day like this." He came and he ended up becoming one of the shuhada with Imam Hussein. The Maqtal mentions that when Bukair and Hur went into the battlefield together, Bukair was so heavily injured. He received the blow from the sword of one of the enemies, such that Bukair died from this. The Maqtal mentions that when the body of Bukair was brought back to the Khaymaga, Hur sees the body of his son covered in injuries and covered in wounds. He sits next to his body, to his son. Do you know what Hur said to him? The first thing Hur did is he sat down next to his son and he said, dead body, mutilated body of his son, he says, Alhamdulillah alladhi mannaka bishahada. Praise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he blessed my son with shahada. Hur then turned around to Imam al-Hussein and he says to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, do you know that when I stopped you in Kufa, when I was coming with my army to stop you and prevent you from coming to Kufa, when I was leaving home, I heard a voice from the heavens cry out behind me, Ya Hur, ibshir bil Jannah. Oh Hur, have glad tidings of Jannah. He says, Ajib. I turned around and I asked myself, who is this person? How can I possibly gain Jannah when I'm going to counter and fight against the son of the daughter of Rasulullah? He says, I didn't understand who it was. Imam al-Hussein smiled at Hur and he said to him, this was the calling of Khidr, giving you glad tidings because he knew that eventually you will have the tawfiq of seeking repentance. And as I go into the Maqtal of Hur, do you know what influenced Hur? What gave Hur the power to repent and to choose death with Imam al-Hussein over life with Umar ibn Sa'ad? You know what was the secret in his istighfar and joining the ranks of Imam al-Hussein? His love and his respect for Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Because when he stopped Imam al-Hussein on the way to Kufa, Imam al-Hussein said to him, Thakalatka ummuk, may your mother lose you. Hur looked at him and said to him, Ya Aba Abdullah, I can never say anything about your mother because your mother is Fatima al-Zahra. And it is important that on these nights of Ashura that you weep for Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. And you weep for the tragedy of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. Sayyidah Fatima weeps for Imam al-Hussein till today. It is narrated like we narrated on the first night, that on Shaba Gharibat, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra came running to the body of Imam al-Hussein and she cried out, Waladi ya Hussein, Allah, don't don't ask me, how did Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra descend from heaven? And how did she run towards the body of Abu Abdullah? My heart tells me that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, even from Jannah, when she came to the body of Imam al-Hussein, she was holding her broken rib. Allah, the rib that was broken when she was crushed between the door and the wall. Allah, Allah. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra from the heavens cried when Sakina was slapped. But when Sakina was slapped, Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra looked at Rasulullah and said, they are slapping Sakina in the way they slapped me behind the burning door. Allah, Allah. Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra has a great connection with Imam al-Hussein and with Hur. Huh? Do you know that in this narration it is narrated, in the narration it states that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra, when she came to the mangled body of Imam al-Hussein, mangled means a body whose bones have been broken to the extent that you cannot separate between bone and sand. The narrations mention Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra came. She sat at the headless body of Imam al-Hussein. She then took blood from the chest of Imam al-Hussein and she wiped it on her forehead. And she said, oh my father Rasulullah, on the day of judgment I will complain to Allah. This is the blood of my son Hussein. Allah, Allah. The narrations mention that Hur bin Yazid al-Riyahi, after Salatul Dhuhr, got permission from Imam al-Hussein. He said to him, Ya Abu Abdullah, permission. Hur does the wida. He goes into the battlefield. He begins to recite poetry by saying, I shall defend Imam al-Hussein in the most staunchest of ways. He attacked the battlefield in a ferocious manner, making the army retreat to the very back. The Maqtal says, فَقَتَلَ مَقْتَلًا عَظِيمًا. He killed such a vast number of people. The historians couldn't keep track of the number of people killed by Hur. So at that point, Umar ibn Sa'ad cried out and said, Wailakum. He says, woe be upon you. These are men who are seasoned and are not scared of death. So attack Hur from every direction. The Maqtal says, Farashakuhu bin Nibal. They began to shoot arrows on Hur from every direction. Hur in the middle of the battlefield, from all the arrows that pierced Hur. The narration mentions there is one that pierced the chest of Hur. A second arrow came and pierced the neck of Hur. As the blood began to flow from the neck, Hur fell down on the ground. The Maqtal says, Allah'in by the name of Ibn Masrah came, Ayub ibn Masrah, with a sword. فَضَرَبَهُ عَلَى رَأْسِهِ. He struck Hur on the center of his head with a sword. Hur's skull was split open. The people are celebrating. The remaining companions of Imam al-Hussein rushed into the battlefield. They brought the body of Hur back into the khaymaga. Hur's body is covered with arrows. His neck is heavily bleeding. He's bleeding from his forehead. They lay him in the khaymaga on the sands. Allah. The narration mentions Imam al-Hussein sat down next to Hur. The riwayah mentions Imam al-Hussein cleaned the blood and the sand from the head of Hur. And he said to him, you are truly like the way your mother named you. You are Hur in the dunya as well as Hur in the akhirah. You are free in the dunya as well as a free man in the akhirah. Then the narration mentions whether the lovers of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra. The narrations mention that Imam al-Hussein looked at the gashing of the wound, the deepness of the wound on the head of Hur, and then the Imam took out a cloth like a handkerchief, a cloth, and it began to tie a cloth around the head of Hur so that he can hold together the wound. The narrations mention this was the cloth of Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra that was given to Imam al-Hussein. And as soon as Imam al-Hussein tied the cloth around the head, Hur became shaheed and his soul left his body. I say to you, Ya Hur, how lucky and how blessed are you that when your head was injured, you had somebody like Imam al-Hussein lovingly tie the cloth of Sayyidah Fatima around your head. But Ya Hur, come to Kufa. Do you know what they did with the head of Imam al-Hussein? The narrations mention, Ya Shi'at al-Muhammad, on the 12th of Muharram, when the head of Imam al-Hussein was brought into the palace of Kufa, Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad started poking and hitting the nose and the teeth of Imam al-Hussein with a rod. Allah, Allah. And then he said, take the head of Imam al-Hussein into the market and let the people look at the head. Ya Shia, Sadat who are sitting, I forgive you. The narration mentions when they brought the severed head of Imam al-Hussein, Imam al-Hussein began reciting the Quran, and people were wondering, how can a severed head recite the Quran? They went to Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad. They said to him, the Quran, the head is reciting Quran. What should we do? Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad said, whip the head of Imam Hussein. Whip him until the Quran stops. The people narrate, they whipped the head of Abu Abdullah and blood. Mata be Hussein, mata be Hur.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. مل کے پڑھیں. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra. مل کے. Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra, Fatima. Fatima Zahra, Fatima Zahra. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. سینے میں لیے رنج و علم کرب و بلا کا، ارے بابا سے ہے ملنے کو چلی ام ابیہا، آنکھوں سے لہو بہتا ہے، پہلو ہے شکستہ، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا. ماشاء اللہ. یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا. امت نے بہت آپ کو تڑ پایا ہے بی بی، ہر حق کے لیے آپ کو ترسایا ہے بی بی، غاصب نے جو دربار میں بلوایا ہے بی بی، اس دکھ سے لرزنے لگا خود عرش خدا کا، یا فاطمہ زہرا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا جو ماتمی فاطمہ زہرا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا شبیر کی دنیا میں ولادت سے بھی پہلے کہتی تھی یہ زہرا کہ بہت سہتی ہوں صدمے، بچہ یہ میرا کوکھ میں بے چین بہت ہے، بچہ میرا کہتا ہے کہ اماں میں ہوں پیاسا، یا فاطمہ زہرا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا، فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا ہے، یا فاطمہ زہرا۔ ارے شبیر کی دنیا میں ولادت سے بھی پہلے کہتی تھی یہ زہرا کہ بہت سہتی ہوں صدمے، ارے بچہ یہ میرا کوکھ میں بے چین بہت ہے، بچہ میرا کہتا ہے کہ اماں میں ہوں پیاسا، یا فاطمہ زہرا۔ شبیر کی دنیا میں ولادت سے بھی پہلے کہتی تھی یہ زہرا کہ بہت سہتی ہوں صدمے، بچہ یہ میرا کوکھ میں بے چین بہت ہے، بچہ میرا کہتا ہے کہ اماں میں ہوں پیاسا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، ہے یا فاطمہ زہرا۔ بلند آواز سے ماشاءاللہ، یا جیو ماتمی یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا سینے میں ازل سے ہی میرے کرب و بلا ہے، جاتے ہوئے زہرا نے یہ دنیا سے کہا ہے، کیا شام میں ہونا ہے یہ سب مجھ کو پتا ہے، تپتے ہوئے صحرا میں ہے شبیر کا لاشا، یا فاطمہ زہرا، 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 مرحبا، یا فاطمہ زہرا۔ دنیا سے چلی کہتی ہوئی بنت پیمبر، غم کرب و بلا کا ہے لیے یہ دل مضطر، آتا ہے تصور میں میرے شام کا منظر، اللہ رکھے زینب و کلثوم کا پردہ، یا فاطمہ زہرا ہے یا فاطمہ زہرا، یا فاطمہ زہرا یا فاطمہ.
بسم الله والحمد لله ولا إله إلا الله والله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا